It was just another slow morning at a small-town diner until a kind waitress paid for an old man's coffee, not knowing he was a billionaire looking for someone exactly like her. What happened next changed her life forever. Please, before we start this story, support us by liking this video, subscribe to our channel, and tell us where you're watching from. The sun hadn't fully risen over Nashville yet, but Ruby's diner was already alive with the soft clatter of silverware and the low hum of 80s rock music playing from the jukebox. The place wasn't fancy: red vinyl booths, checkered floors, and a laminated menu that hadn't changed in decades, but it had heart. Regulars called it the soul of Main Street. Tiffany Lewis, a 27-year-old waitress with cocoa skin and curly hair tucked under a red bandana, had been working at Ruby's since she was 19. She knew everyone by name, their orders, their stories, even their bad days. She worked hard, smiled harder, and gave out kindness like it was part of the job description. But life hadn't exactly been fair to her. Between raising her younger brother, paying off nursing school loans she hadn't even finished, and helping her grandma with medical bills, Tiffany barely had enough to scrape by. Still, she showed up every day with the same warm energy. That morning, as she poured fresh coffee into chipped white mugs, she noticed someone unfamiliar walking in. An elderly white man, hunched slightly, with a scruffy gray beard and worn-out corduroy coat. He moved slowly, like every step took effort. There was a softness in his eyes that didn't match his rugged exterior. "Morning, sir," Tiffany greeted him as he approached the counter. "You want a seat by the window or up here at the bar?" "Window sounds good," he said with a nod, his voice raspy but kind. She led him to the booth and placed a menu down. "Let me guess, you look like a man who appreciates black coffee, no cream, no sugar." He chuckled faintly. "You'd be guessing right." Tiffany smiled and went to fetch his drink. When she returned with the coffee, she noticed the man staring out the window like he hadn't seen the world in a while. "You new in town?" she asked. "Just passing through," he replied. "Looking for something, I suppose. Haven't quite figured out what." Tiffany tilted her head but didn't press. "Well, you're welcome to stay as long as you want. We don't rush people around here." He nodded, but as she placed the check on the table, something shifted. The man reached into his coat pocket, pulled out a torn leather wallet, and paused. His fingers fumbled, but came up empty. I thought I had a couple dollars on me," he muttered, embarrassed. Without missing a beat, Tiffany took the check back. "It's just coffee," she said, smiling. "Don't worry about it. This one's on me." He looked up at her, genuinely stunned. "Are you sure?" "I'm always sure about kindness," she replied. "Besides, I've had worse mornings. At least this one smells like bacon." The old man chuckled, then said quietly, "You have no idea how much that means to me." Tiffany just gave him a wink and walked off to help the next table. She had no idea who the man really was, or how that small act would change her life forever. Back at the counter, Tiffany refilled coffee pots and checked in with her regulars, not thinking twice about the cup of coffee she'd comped. To her, kindness didn't require a receipt. She'd grown up watching her late mother offer meals to strangers and neighbors alike, even when their own pantry was thin. That spirit lived in Tiffany, whether it earned her tips or not. Across the diner, the old man sat quietly, sipping his coffee and occasionally watching Tiffany from behind his glasses. There was something genuine in her energy, no pretense, no pity, just heart. He wasn't used to that. People treated him differently once they learned who he was. That's why he stopped telling them. His name was Howard Beckett, a reclusive billionaire who made his fortune investing in clean energy and tech decades ago. After losing his wife to cancer and watching his children fight over inheritance they hadn't earned, Howard disappeared from the public eye. He'd grown tired of being surrounded by people who only cared about his money. So he set out across America, dressing simply, staying at modest hotels and visiting places where no one would recognize him. Ruby's Diner was just another stop until he met Tiffany. When he finished his coffee, Howard reached into his coat and pulled out a crumpled napkin. He scribbled something on it with a pen he kept tucked behind his ear. Folding it carefully, he placed it on the table and stood to leave. Tiffany caught him at the door. "Leaving already?" He smiled. "Got what I needed. Thank you again, Miss Tiffany. You take care now, she said. Come back anytime. As he walked out, the bell above the door gave its familiar ding. Tiffany went to clear his booth and noticed the folded napkin beside the mug. She opened it, expecting maybe a thank you note, or one of those doodles that sweet older customers sometimes left. Instead it read, "Kindness is rare. Never let the world change that. HB. She blinked. HB. The initials rang no bells. She figured he was just being sweet. She tucked the napkin into her apron pocket and went back to work. Meanwhile, Howard sat in his rental car across the street, watching her through the diner window. His fingers tapped on the steering wheel. Deep in thought. He had billions, homes around the world, and access to the most powerful people in business and politics. Yet in all those years, no one had made him feel seen the way that young waitress did, for nothing more than a cup of coffee and a smile. That night, back in his hotel suite, Howard made a phone call to his assistant, Mason. "I found her," he said. "Found who, sir?" "The person I've been looking for," Howard replied. "The one who doesn't know how powerful her kindness is." There was silence on the other end. "What do you want to do?" Howard smiled. "Change her life." The following morning, Tiffany arrived at Ruby's diner like always. 30 minutes early, hair tied back, shoes already aching, and a warm smile despite the aching bills she hadn't paid. She didn't do the job for the money, though she needed it badly, but because she genuinely liked people. Most days that was enough. She had almost forgotten about the old man from yesterday, Howard Beckett, though she didn't know his name yet. That is, until a black Lincoln parked outside just as the lunch rush was dying down. A sharply dressed man in a tailored navy suit stepped out, holding a leather briefcase. He looked completely out of place in the humble, greasy-smelling diner. He walked straight to the counter where Tiffany was pouring iced tea into a mason jar for one of her regulars. "Excuse me, ma'am," he said in a deep, composed voice. "Are you Tiffany Lewis?" She blinked. Yes. Did something happen?" "No, nothing bad. My name's Mason Cartwright. I work for Mr. Howard Beckett." She tilted her head. "Who?" Mason smiled. "You might know him as the man you gave free coffee to yesterday morning." Tiffany chuckled nervously. "Oh, I didn't even catch his name. He seemed like he needed it." "He did," Mason said seriously. "More than you know." Tiffany leaned against the counter, confused and a bit suspicious. "Okay, so what's this about?" Mason opened his briefcase and slid a thick, cream-colored envelope across the counter. "Mr. Beckett asked me to deliver this to you personally." She hesitated before picking it up. "This isn't one of those rich guy prank shows, is it?" "No, ma'am. Mr. Beckett doesn't believe in cameras. Just people." Curious now, Tiffany opened the envelope. Inside was a handwritten letter and a cashier's check. Her breath caught in her throat. The check was made out to her for $50,000. She looked up, stunned. "Is this real?" "As real as the coffee you gave him," Mason said. "He doesn't expect anything in return. He just wanted you to know your kindness was noticed and appreciated." Tiffany stood there speechless. Her hands trembled. $50,000 could mean paying off her student debt. It could cover her grandma's treatment. It could put her little brother through college. It could even buy her a fresh start. I don't know what to say," she whispered. "Just say thank you," Mason replied with a small smile. "And maybe think about what you want next. Mr. Beckett believes you were made for more than pouring coffee." Then with a respectful nod, Mason turned and walked out, leaving Tiffany standing behind the counter, completely dazed. The entire diner had gone quiet, curious eyes watching, but too polite to ask. Tiffany swallowed hard, tucking the envelope against her chest like it might vanish if she let go. Outside, the black Lincoln disappeared down Main Street. She had no idea that this was only the beginning. That evening, Tiffany sat at the small kitchen table in her two-bedroom apartment on the west side of Nashville. The envelope and the check lay between her elbows, right beside a stack of unpaid bills and a shut-off notice from the electric company. The number, $50,000, still didn't seem real. She'd spent all day in a fog, making mistakes on orders and spilling 2 drinks, but none of it mattered. Her world had shifted. Across the room, her younger brother, Malik, flopped onto the couch, munching on microwave popcorn. So, are you seriously not going to cash it? He asked, glancing over at the check like it was cursed treasure. I don't know, Malik, Tiffany murmured. People don't just hand over money like this for nothing. What if it's a setup? Malik laughed. Tiff, the dude's a billionaire. I Googled him. Howard Beckett. He's like big time. Tech, solar energy, foundations, the whole deal. You know how rich you have to be to disappear and still show up on Forbes? She sighed, running a hand through her curls. Even so, I didn't do anything special. I gave him a coffee. Yeah, but you gave it without judging him. He looked like a broke drifter, and you treated him like a person. That matters. Maybe this is the universe finally paying you back. Tiffany looked down at the check again. The letter that came with it had been even more surprising than the money. In Howard's neat handwriting, he'd written, Tiffany, you reminded me that kindness still exists in a world that often forgets. This is not a reward, it's a seed. Plant it however you choose, and watch what grows. She folded the letter and stared out the window. For years, she'd let her own dreams collect dust. Nursing school had been a casualty of her mother's death. She dropped out to care for Malik, who was only 12 at the time, and worked double shifts just to keep the lights on. Now he was finishing high school, and the path that had once belonged to her seemed buried. But what if Howard was right? What would you do with it? She asked Malik softly. He grinned. Easy. I'd buy that Mustang from around the block, drop out of school, and start a YouTube channel where I just eat cereal in weird places. Tiffany burst into laughter, the first genuine one of the day. Seriously though, he said, voice turning warm, you always take care of everybody else. Maybe it's time you take care of you. She sat there for a long moment, thinking about nursing school, her mother's dreams, and all the nights she'd cried herself to sleep, wondering if she'd ever matter. The money wasn't just a gift, it was a crossroads, and deep down she knew she couldn't go back to how things were. She picked up her phone and searched for the admissions office at Nashville General School of Nursing. Her fingers hovered over the dial. Then she hit call. The line rang once, twice. Then a voice answered, Admissions. How can I help you? Tiffany smiled softly. Hi, my name's Tiffany Lewis, and I think I'm ready to start again. A month later, Tiffany stood on the polished tile floor of Nashville General School of Nursing, clutching a new backpack and a folder of enrollment papers. Her heart thudded in her chest. She'd spent weeks juggling diner shifts and preparing for classes, wondering if she still had what it took to study, to learn, to dream. The last time she walked through college hallways, she was just a teenager with fire in her belly and a mother battling stage 4 cancer. Back then, she was full of ambition, thinking she'd be a nurse by 22. Life had other plans, but now she was here again, thanks to a cup of coffee and an old man no one had noticed but her. That morning before heading to campus, Tiffany had stopped by Ruby's diner one last time, not to quit, but to say goodbye. She was still working weekend shifts to help with bills, but her manager, Dottie, insisted she take fewer hours to focus on school. You better not disappear on me completely, Dottie said, hugging her tightly. We're all rooting for you. Tiffany smiled, her voice thick with emotion. I won't forget where I started. As she walked the halls of the nursing school, other students bustled around her. Some young, some older like her, all chasing something. She found her classroom and took a seat near the front. The professor, a brisk woman named Dr. Lynn Carter, introduced herself and dove into the first lecture about patient care and clinical protocols. Tiffany listened intently, taking notes like her life depended on it. Her eyes glowed with purpose. She wasn't just there to pass, she was there to honor everything she had lost and everything she had regained. After class, as she packed up her things, she got a surprise phone call. It was from a number she didn't recognize. Hello, she answered cautiously. Tiffany Lewis? Said the calm voice on the other end. Yes? This is Mason Cartwright. Mr. Beckett asked me to check in and see how things were going. Her heart skipped. Oh, please, tell him I started nursing school today. I'm actually just leaving my first class. There was a pause. I think that will make him very happy, Mason said warmly. He's been following from a distance. You made quite an impression. Tiffany smiled. Please thank him for me. I don't even have the words. He doesn't want words, Miss Lewis. He believes your actions will speak louder. Before the call ended, Mason added one last thing. There may come a time when Mr. Beckett wants to meet again. He prefers to keep his distance, but something tells me he's not quite finished. As Tiffany hung up, she stood on the steps of the school, wind brushing her cheeks, her books pressed to her chest. Everything in her life had changed, and yet it all felt so right. She glanced up at the sky and whispered, "Thank you." Somewhere across the city, Howard Beckett sat on a park bench reading a newspaper, a gentle smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. He'd seen too many people forget where they came from, but not Tiffany Lewis, not her. Weeks passed, and Tiffany's life began to settle into a new rhythm. Classes were challenging but invigorating, and the future she once thought was lost felt suddenly within reach. Yet the memory of Howard Beckett lingered in her mind like a quiet spark, reminding her that her journey was far from ordinary. One Friday evening, Tiffany was finishing her shift at Ruby's Diner when Mason Cartwright appeared once again, this time with an invitation. "Good evening, Tiffany," Mason greeted her with a polite nod. "Mr. Beckett would like to invite you to a dinner. It's an opportunity to meet him personally." Tiffany blinked in surprise. "Dinner? Me? But why?" Mason smiled softly. "He wants to thank you in person, and there's something else he believes you should hear." Tiffany's mind raced. What could a billionaire want to say to a waitress turned student like her? Was it a business proposal, a charity request, or something more personal? Despite the whirlwind of questions, Tiffany agreed. She couldn't say no to the man who had changed her life with a simple act of kindness. That night, dressed in a modest but elegant dress borrowed from her Aunt Tiffany, arrived at a sleek, modern restaurant downtown. The place buzzed with quiet conversations and the soft clink of silverware. She felt out of place at first, but Mason guided her to a private dining room where Howard Beckett waited. The moment Howard stood, his warm eyes met hers. "Tiffany," he said, extending a hand. "Thank you for coming." She shook his hand, still trying to find her voice. "Thank you for inviting me." Howard gestured to the seat across from him. "Please sit. I wanted to tell you that your kindness touched me deeply. Not just the coffee, but the way you looked at me without assumptions or judgment." Tiffany smiled shyly. "I didn't think much of it." Howard shook his head. "That's where you're wrong. People like you are rare. The world needs more of your kind. I want to help you not just finish school, but pursue a career where you can make a real difference." Tiffany's eyes filled with tears. "I don't know what to say." "You don't need to say anything now," Howard replied, "but I want you to consider joining my foundation's health outreach program after graduation. You'll have resources, support, and the freedom to help underserved communities." Tiffany's heart swelled. Here was the chance to not only follow her dreams, but to make an impact on a scale she'd never imagined. As dinner ended and she stepped back into the cool night air, Tiffany realized this was more than just an offer. It was a new beginning, one built on kindness, opportunity, and trust. Her life was changing in ways she'd never dreamed possible, and she was ready to embrace it. The months that followed were a whirlwind of hard work and growing confidence for Tiffany. Balancing nursing school, part-time shifts at Ruby's Diner, and volunteering for Howard Beckett's foundation wasn't easy, but she welcomed every challenge. Each step brought her closer to the life she had only dared to dream about. Graduation day arrived on a bright spring morning. Tiffany stood among her classmates, dressed in her cap and gown, her family beaming in the front row. Malik gave her a thumbs up, eyes shining with pride. For the first time in years, Tiffany felt the weight of possibility resting gently on her shoulders instead of crushing her spirit. Later that afternoon, Tiffany received a call from Mason. "Mr. Beckett would like to congratulate you in person," Mason said. "He's arranged a small gathering tonight." That evening, Tiffany arrived at Howard's downtown penthouse. The city lights glittered through the floor-to-ceiling windows as she stepped inside. Howard greeted her with the same warm smile that had started it all. "Tiffany," he said, handing her a small box wrapped in blue silk ribbon. "This is for you." Curious, she untied the ribbon and opened the box to find a simple silver necklace with a heart-shaped pendant. "It's a symbol," Howard explained, "of kindness, resilience, and the heart you've shown. Wear it to remind yourself how far you've come. Tears welled up in Tiffany's eyes as she clasped the necklace around her neck. Thank you, she whispered. Howard nodded. You're going to do incredible things, and I'll be here, supporting you every step of the way. Over the following years, Tiffany blossomed into a dedicated nurse and community advocate. She led outreach programs that brought healthcare to rural neighborhoods and inspired young people to chase their dreams no matter the obstacles. Malik, inspired by his sister's journey, pursued his own passions with newfound confidence. One afternoon, standing outside a mobile clinic she helped launch, Tiffany looked up at the clear blue sky and smiled. Sometimes life handed you unexpected chances. Sometimes a simple act of kindness could change everything. And for Tiffany Lewis, that coffee had been the beginning of a beautiful new chapter, one filled with hope, purpose, and the power to make a difference. Her story wasn't just about a billionaire or a waitress. It was about the heart that connects us all. Tiffany's story shows how one small act of kindness can spark a life-changing journey. From serving a simple cup of coffee to stepping into a future filled with hope and purpose, she reminds us that compassion and courage can open doors we never imagined. If Tiffany's journey inspired you, take a moment today to show kindness to someone around you. You never know how much of an impact it might make. And if you enjoyed this story, please like, share, and subscribe for more uplifting stories that celebrate the power of kindness and resilience.